This is the Sewing Circle podcast presented by Hanky Code. I'm Rebecca Vanderkoy, here to introduce to you up-and-coming queer artists and the powerful stories behind their work. Today, I am thrilled to have the wonderful queer pop artist Rachel Bochner joining me. You may know her from her 2024 album Lovergirl, as well as You Don't Want Me Like That, which is a single released last year featuring Xana. Rachel, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're thrilled to have you. So, you've been sharing your music on Spotify for the last 5 years. And I'm curious, how long have you been writing and making music?
So I kind of had a late start to songwriting. I think a lot of artists, I when I hear them talking about like their journey, they'll say how they were writing songs like when they were 7 years old or something like that. And I guess in a way, like I always really, really loved music, and singing and performing, but I didn't really start seriously songwriting until around 2018. I was in school and I just kind of had this aha moment where I was like, I need to do this and I want to pursue this. So I kind of just started writing alone. I didn't really have any other friends who were making, music in general, especially not pop music. So it was kind of like this solitary thing for a while. And then I moved back to New York in 2019 and kind of started to try and get my footing in the music scene, in New York and Brooklyn and in
Hmm.
the city. And then COVID hit. So it was kind of this like weird bubble to be, um, like making music in and kind of trying to find people to collaborate with. And it kind of like opened that up in a lot of ways because during that time, I think people were really receptive to like working with people no matter where they were in the world,
Yeah.
because you had to do it virtually anyways. So I think that was kind of a great way for me to just get a lot more experience, like working with different people, um, in different places and people who like had different kind of I guess like experience levels in songwriting. And then yeah, when the world kind of opened back up, I moved into the city and was co-writing a lot and working with a lot of amazing collaborators. So I haven't really been doing it for like that long. I mean, I guess now it's almost 7 years, so that feels actually kind of long. But when
Yeah.
you think of like how like Chapel Roan was, actively releasing music for like 10 years or something before
Yeah.
she really made it is like, I don't know, it's kind of reassuring rather.
Yeah. No, that absolutely makes sense. So, kind of speaking on that, how has your music and writing style changed since you first began doing music?
Oh my God, so much. I think like I went through a lot of just like growth in terms of like maturity and skill and identity in, the first like 4 or 5 years of really seriously songwriting. Um
Hmm.
and so I think back like some of the first songs that I wrote, in like 2018, and they are like I like kind of cringe at them just because like I don't know, I feel like I really have grown so much from that point. Like I think I'm just a lot more confident in, what I have to say and how I like want to say it. And I
Yeah.
think in the first like 2 3 years and still now, but like especially in that beginning kind of period, I think I didn't really know what my writing style was. I didn't really know like anything about who I was as an artist because I wasn't releasing music. I wasn't like kind of trying to do any world building. I was just like kind of following this feeling of like I need to be writing music.
Hmm.
So I feel like now I just have a lot firmer of a grasp on like who I am as an artist and the types of things that I want to say, and I guess I just like I'm not as afraid, I think, of what other people are going to think of what I'm writing and like feeling like it's not going to be good enough or whatever. Like I like the music that I make and I think, you know, above all that's kind of like one of the more important things because when you put art out there, like you need to stand behind it. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I think
absolutely.
I've definitely evolved, I would say.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic though. And it's also probably like there's something to be said for being able to look back at your work and just kind of like see that growth and that hard work really paying off, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
So, kind of like going along with that, nowadays, what is your writing process like? Is it always the same or does it kind of vary?
It varies. I sometimes really do like to write alone, like depending on what I'm writing about. I think
Hmm.
with Lovergirl, I kind of like returned to like solo writing a bit more than I had on like the previous EP because co-writing I think is so fun and it's like such an amazing experience when you find people that you really, really click with and, you write songs that you love with.
Hmm.
But I think because Lovergirl was kind of like this really personal feeling project, it was important to me, I think, to at the very least like flesh out a lot of the song ideas by myself first. And some of them I just wrote alone and then some, the rest of them I did like either, bring kind of a concept and like some of the writing to some of the co-writers that like I really love and trust a lot. Um and then finished those ideas with them. But I think now as I'm working on like my next thing, it's kind
Yeah.
of a mix of that. Um and just like kind of your typical session, like showing up with, maybe an idea or maybe you just like come up with something like in the room. But I think after Lovergirl, like the after the Lovergirl era of like my life, a lot happened that like there's just a lot to say. So I feel like the songwriting process now is kind of just like sifting through all of the possible things that I could write about and like picking one.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, I think it kind of varies, but I would say like the more personal or like emotional the like topic is, the more likely it is that I'll like at least kind of start it by myself.
No, that absolutely makes sense. So, kind of talking about, some of these songs that are more personal, whether they're on Lovergirl or some of your other projects, was it difficult to get to a place where you were kind of comfortable, like sharing some of these more vulnerable things, or like how did that kind of come about?
I think in a way writing them kind of helped me get more comfortable in like just the situation that I found myself in, kind of
Hmm.
having these like realizations about my identity and like navigating life as a queer person and relationships and stuff. And so I think when it came time to release the songs, like I wasn't nervous about like I didn't feel scared about sharing them because I think the writing process was like very healing. And I also think that like as I was rolling out the EP, I like, I was on tour with Xana and she has like a really, really awesome fan base that like consists of a lot of queer people. So I felt like when Lovergirl was kind of like being released into the world, I felt like it was, being put into like loving hands.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. And kind of talking a little bit more on like the queerness and queer themes in your work. You
Mhm.
know, there has definitely been kind of a lesbian and queer pop renaissance lately. And so I'm kind of
100%.
curious, like, definitely. So I'm curious, like, what does queerness in your work mean to you?
I think it really just is a reflection of like my life and like my experience. I think as I kind of was coming, coming to terms, I guess, with like my own identity because I am someone who like realized my queerness like later in life. Um I think that like songwriting just even more than it was before, like became this cathartic and like comforting kind of outlet for me to just talk about like things that were going on in my life. And so like
Mhm.
queerness is so like intertwined with all of my work because like I am a queer person and like these are the things that I experience in my life and I'm just kind of talking about my life. Um and so I think like what I think is really, really beautiful, is seeing how special it is, I think, for people to have that kind of representation in music that they're listening to because, like, to me, I do feel like I'm just kind of writing music about things that are happening in my life that just also so
Right.
happen to be, often about, like, queer relationships or whatever, um but then seeing, I think, like, how it resonates with people just kind of reminds me, like, how crucial it is to have that representation and how meaningful it can be for people to find that and, like, see themselves in it. So, I think there's something really I don't know, it just kind of, like, motivates me and inspires me to, like, continue being really open about my, like, relationships, I guess, and kind
Yeah.
of my identity because I know that it helps people, I guess, also feel comfortable in their own.
Yeah. No, that absolutely makes sense, and I think definitely, like, music is such a powerful thing, and especially now just, like, having different artists and different songs that really kind of personify and show different aspects of the queer experience, I think is, like, so crucial for a lot of reasons. So it's definitely something super important.
Yeah.
So, where do you draw inspiration for your work?
I think what is interesting, before putting out Lovergirl and like working on songs kind of around when I started working on that EP, which was at the beginning of 2023, um, I felt like what I was writing about, it was always like rooted in some sort of emotion or experience that I could relate to, but it did not always feel like um super like personal. Like I think sometimes I would, bring in like a lot of fiction and
Mhm.
or talk about like, an experience that like someone close to me like in my life went through. And I feel like that was maybe a little bit of a defense mechanism like by I guess not, kind of not that every song needs to be like autobiographical by any means, but I think I was maybe subconsciously kind of not allowing myself to like look completely inward. And yeah, so I think once I kind of got past that, because, that's you're never gonna be able to stay like that forever.
Yeah.
Um I started writing music that just felt like a lot more personal and like felt like was like they were like little pieces of me as opposed to like little stories I was telling.
Mhm.
Um and every songwriter is going to dramatize things or or like, kind of take things and paint them in maybe like a more exaggerated way or whatever just for the sake of kind of like really honing in on an emotion or like a feeling or whatever but yeah, I
Mhm.
mean now it just kind of feels like I write about my experiences and things that I've gone through and things that I've felt, and that is I think a much scarier way to like go about making art when it really does feel
Yeah.
like it's close to you, but I do think that that like yields better music and better art. So,
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. No, I definitely agree that like that level of vulnerability, I think really sets apart or if really any kind, honestly. Um,
Yeah.
so kind of
That's
talking still on like
scary.
oh, it is scary. I think that too, even with like writing, which I'm not writing music, I'm just writing for like this blog and for other projects as well. But there is kind of
Hmm.
a level of like vulnerability I think that's required. And for a long time, I personally was very hesitant about that. And then once I started really being more open, um, especially kind of related to my queerness and my experiences, that's when my work started to get more traction and people started to be more
Yeah.
open to it. Because I think like people can tell, and there is something important about that vulnerability, and
Yeah,
it is scary also.
for sure. I think like yeah, it's scary for a lot of reasons, and especially when you're kind of being open about something like queerness, you are almost like your like default is to worry, I think, a little bit about some sort of like backlash or getting some sort of
Yeah,
like negativity from, certain people. And while of course that like absolutely does happen, I think that for me at least, the like overwhelming amount of like positive, reactions that I get and like people really resonating with it and in a way that like of course like anyone of any like sexuality, like if you find a song that like really really moves you, like you're gonna have like an intense kind of reaction to that. But I do think that there is
yeah,
something like really special about like a queer person finding a song by an openly queer artist and being like, "Oh my God, like this, like I don't have to like change any like storyline in my head. Like this is like something that like feels like is my experience."
no, absolutely. I think that is super important. And for like when I used to live in a tiny town in Michigan, like that's where I grew up. And like once I finally stumbled upon queer music, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. Because like I knew almost no other openly queer people, but I was like, there is music that is speaking to my experience. And so now as I kind of listen to music, I'm in a very different place, but I can't not
Mm-hmm.
think about just kind of the power and importance of that. Um, and I think there are still people in places like that who really need music that speaks
Yeah.
to their experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, kind of going back to inspiration a bit, what artists really inspire you?
I am, of course, a huge lover of Chapel Roan. I think like everything that she has done like in the past couple of years is just like truly amazing, and I think I respect her a lot. Um as a songwriter, as like an artist, as like a creative person. Um and I think that she like knows who she is and really like stands firmly in it, and I think that that's awesome.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
also, have always been a listener of Taylor Swift's music, really, like for years and years and years. Like I feel like I grew up on that. Um
Yeah.
I'm like every single time I get asked this question, I have to open up my Spotify because I'm like I forget everything.
Yeah,
Um
that's so real.
okay, yeah, I mean I listen to like the way that I kind of consume music is I have like a core kind of rotation of artists, and then like
Yeah.
here and there I'll like find new songs and new artists that I like, but like I always kind of fall back to like the same core. Like, there's like Chapel, there's Muna, there's let me think. I'm like scrolling through. Let me pull this up. Um let's see. Oh, of course. I really, really, really love Lana Del Rey's first couple of albums, like
Oh yeah.
Born to Die, Ultraviolence, what was it, Honeymoon. Lust for Life, Norman fucking Rockwell, like really, really loved all those. Um,
Yeah.
Also, like in that same kind of era of my life, I was a big Marina and the Diamonds fan. Um,
Why did I
and
just
then
know
like
that was what you were gonna say?
yeah, I mean I feel like it goes hand in hand, like the
Oh,
Tumblr
absolutely.
baddies. Um, let's see. And yeah, I mean I think like also being in New York, maybe I kind of also have been listening to more like indie rock kind of artists. Um, and that kind of I think plays in like it influences kind of the music that I'm making now.
Yeah,
Oh, like I love um Lucy Dacus's new singles that she just put out. This isn't really
so
like
good.
indie rock, but Mallrat is putting out a new album that I'm very excited about. I've been listening to a lot of Pale Waves. The Suki Waterhouse album that came out like last year, I also really love. Um, what else? What else? What else? I'm like looking at all these random
Just
playlists that I
scrolling through all of
have.
your Spotify.
Yeah, like oh yeah, okay, like Slow Pulp, I really like Blonde Shell, who's also I think about to release a new project. So it's kind of a mix of like the pop, the pop, and then
Yeah,
kind of more like indie alt leaning things.
yeah. I feel like that's a good combination of just like
Yeah.
artists to listen to and references. Um, so I recently got to see you perform at your Valentine's Day show, which was super fun. Um, are there any particular songs that you have been really like especially enjoying performing live?
Um, that is a good question. I think um certain songs I like have kept in the rotation for like years just because they're fun to play live. Like um Graduation is a single that I put out in like 2022 or something.
Hmm.
And it's basically like a friendship love song. And I love performing that one. So I always like I've kept that in even though it's like not necessarily one of like my like top streamed songs, but I just love it.
Yeah,
Um Groupie is always so fun. You Don't Want Me Like That is always like one of my favorites to do. I mean, I did a cover at the Valentine's Day show. That was really fun.
yeah, that was very fun.
Um, and it's like kind of had this whole like situation unfold on Twitter and whatever about it. So that's been interesting, but I it's really awesome to see like how many people are like really excited about the cover. So I am gonna put out like an official cover, so that is fun. But yeah, that's also
Yeah.
been kind of a whole clusterfuck of its of its
Yeah,
own.
no, that's crazy. For
Yeah. Yeah.
folks listening who don't know the whole drama, um, this is regarding the Guilty as Sin cover, which was one of my favorite parts of your show, by the way. It was super fun.
Thank
And the
you.
pronouns were changed because, obviously, from he, him to she, her, and
Hmm.
Twitter had a meltdown about it, basically.
Yeah.
Um, but no,
I
that's
think
really
that
exciting that you're
like
putting it out, though.
yeah, and I mean like the only thing I'll say about that is I think like especially on Twitter, like it's just words, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's I think it's really hard to like understand people's tone and understand like, the nuance, I guess, of what someone is saying when it's
yeah,
really primarily just like text. And I think that like Taylor Swift's fan base is a really fascinating case study because it is so massive and it is
yeah,
like so serious. Like people are really, really, really like they do not play around with like their
yeah.
love for her.
They're very
And
intense.
yeah, so it's I mean, I think ultimately, like, I actually don't think that if I did this with like any other song that I would have had nearly the same reaction. I think that
Yeah,
this is like a Swiftie specific thing, but um, yeah, I mean, I think like you're never gonna like make everyone happy, especially if something is like reaching a really large audience. So
Yeah.
I think whether, people's like discomfort or anger is coming from a place of like straight up homophobia or like misunderstanding like what was even happening or whatever, I think like there's always going to be negativity. And so I think what's more important is that like there were a lot of people that like really, really loved the pronoun change and like felt like seen by it, and that is like a lot more important. And I know that like my intentions for putting
Yeah.
this cover out were never like anything negative or like anti the original or whatever, so it is what
Yeah.
it is. But yeah, not on my bingo card.
No, that is a very wild experience, but I'm excited that you're putting it out though. So
Me
like
too.
that's a silver lining to it.
Yeah.
Um, so other than that cover that is coming out, is there anything else new and exciting on the horizon for you?
I'm currently working on my debut album, which is really
Exciting.
awesome. I guess like on Spotify they like categorize Lovergirl as an album because there's 7 songs, but
Yeah.
like that was an EP in my brain. Um, and like functionally it was an EP, but yeah, so I'm working on like a full-length album, which I'm really, really excited about. So I'm kind of like in the thick of the writing and like production process of that. But like I mentioned before, I think like Lovergirl was written like kind of all in 2023. So like a lot of life was lived and a lot of shit happened like in that after,
Yeah.
that post Lovergirl kind of like period. Um, and so I just feel like I have a lot that I am excited to share, a lot that I just needed to like put into music.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm just really excited about that, but that won't be finished for a little while. So I think doing something fun and spontaneous like a Guilty as Sin cover with she her pronouns is a great like kind of thing to do in
Perfect.
the interim.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. And also that's super exciting about the album. Are you kind of eyeing any particular time when you're hoping to release it, or are you just kind of gonna see what happens with the creative process?
My like optimistic goal is to like start rolling it out at the very end of the year. Um So, like, first, like, single or 2, but
Yeah,
we'll definitely see how everything goes. Um, because I feel like I'm, like, putting a lot of pressure on it in, like, a good
yeah.
way and a bad way because it feels like higher stakes because it's my, like, first full-length album. And so I want everything to feel amazing and perfect, which it probably never will, but, yeah, so that's kind of my goal. So, but we'll see.
No, that makes sense. And that's super exciting. I can't wait to kind of start seeing stuff happening with that. Um, and also just thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. I've
Of
been
course.
really loving your music and your lyricism, and I'm thrilled for the Guilty as Sin cover, but also for your debut album, which I know is going to be fantastic.
Thank you so much. You are very, very lovely, and I was more than happy to chat with you, and I'm glad that you were able to come to the show.
Me too.
Yeah, so thank you.